Another year, another boat launch. After a largely routine splashing with Marella back at her summer berth, I glue down the new cabin top solar panel and can finally put up our repaired spray hood. With the stress of launch behind me, I get back to making new countertops. After getting hold of some new plywood, and despite my bad attempts at woodworking, I'm now ready to glue on the Formica laminate that will give our new work surfaces their pretty new look. My name is Andy, and this is the story of one small ship.
Good morning. It's a lot less windy today, but there's still a chill in the air, so I'm leaving the cockpit tent up so I can trap some of the heat in here. I brought my miter saw down today so I can cut the angles on the pieces of trim in the galley. And once that's done, I need to get into the head and tear out the wash basin so I can fabricate a new shelf for that. And I need to sand away the old laminate on this little lid for the locker behind the oven, which is going to get reused, and I need a rough surface for the epoxy to bind against. And once I have all of those pieces fabricated and everything sanded down and neat, then I can laminate on the Formica. But first of all, let's get those pieces of trim up and cut those angles. The mistake I made. I cut these in the wrong orientation, so I had to dig them out again and chamfer the edges. It's a classic Andy mistake, but it came out all right and it does look okay, so I'm not too worried about that. The other mistake I made is, of course, I ruined this board, so now when I put the trim in here, it comes perilously close to the edge here when it lines up with the lid. But I think I can manage. I can always just shove a lot of epoxy in there to stiffen up the whole construction, so I don't think it's a big worry. Now I'm going to get in the head and I'm going to dig out the old wash basin and the shelf for that, because there are some issues with it that I didn't have time to address last year. This is the shelf for the sink in the head that I made last year, and while it was serviceable over the summer and worked okay, it does have some issues. First of all, it has these notches cut out in it because when I made this, I still thought that the sink was going to be sliding in and out, so I cut these out for the hoses in the holding tank when the sink is in the in position. But since it's mounted permanently now, these actually protrude a little bit underneath the trim, and it doesn't look very good, and it doesn't provide any backing for the laminate, which I'm going to put on here. So I need to make a new one which doesn't have these notches. Also, this is 9mm plywood, and I want to make one out of 12mm plywood so that it's a little bit beefier, and also make it a little bit bigger on this side so that it doesn't twist and flex as much as this does. But yeah, I can still use this as a template, and it'll be nice to not have to measure out the hole for the sink again. Even though this new shelf is going to be permanently mounted, I'm going to have to cut out one of those notches here anyway, because this piece goes in deeper than the old one, and so I'm going to have to make room for one of the holding tank hoses. Right, here's the roll of Formica that I managed to track down, and so I've really been looking forward to laying this out and cutting out the pieces to laminate onto these boards. But there's no room to do that on the boat, so I'm going to take this ashore and I'm going to find a nice flat surface to lay this out on where it won't get destroyed. And then I'm going to cut out the pieces I need, and then I need to mix up epoxy to glue them on. Now, Formica is usually press glued, and I can't do that, but I'm hoping that the epoxy itself will be a good enough bond. I don't think it's anything to worry about, but I will want to weigh them down, so I'm going to have to find something big and flat and heavy to put onto these while it's curing. But first of all, I'm going to take this ashore and find a good place to lay it out and cut out the pieces. This deck outside the Harbour Association's clubhouse is perfect for this. All right, let's lay this Formica out. According to the people who sold me this, you're supposed to be able to cut it with regular scissors, so let me see how that works. Well, I'm going to score this with a carpet knife so that it'll come apart, hopefully without ruining it. And I did double check that I turned this thing the right way round so that I'm not making the piece which is supposed to go on the top for the underside, because I'm not laminating the underside. And yeah, again, I don't want to waste more of this than I really have to. After a bit of trial and error, I've come up with a decent technique of scoring this a couple of times on each side that I want to cut, and then just bending it to kind of break it off. It works quite well, and it seems to not cause any tears in the laminate, which I had a lot of in the beginning, but now I think it's looking more and more decent. Success-ish. Okay, that took a bit longer than anticipated as usual, but finally I think I'm ready to apply epoxy to this. I found an old piece of plywood in the scrapyard, which is fine just to let this sit on so that epoxy doesn't leak onto the teak locker lids. And I'm going to just laminate them on top of each other and then weigh them down with water buckets and anything else heavy that I can find around the boat. I think that's going to be all right. So yeah, I'm going to go and mix up some epoxy, and then we're going to apply that to this. And hopefully I won't make a mess of things. We shall see. There, this ketchupy consistency is kind of what I'm looking for. I don't want anything too thick, but also not too thin. I think this is going to be perfect. Right, I kind of underestimated how much epoxy I was going to need for this, but I think I managed to stretch it to enough. So now I just need to turn this round and see if we can put this laminate on. I don't have enough to wet out the Formica, which I would love to have done, but I don't want to get started on that because I'm afraid that the epoxy is going to start to go off and I'm going to have to redo everything. So hopefully having done just that one side is going to be enough to make it stick. We shall find out. I'm actually not just going to weigh this down, I'm going to clamp it down as well, because I'm worried especially about these edges. But yeah, I'll sort that out when I'm done with the rest, and now I'll go and mix up another batch. There. That took a bit longer than expected, but I'm finally done. Now this will have to sit and cure until probably tomorrow afternoon, so tomorrow morning I'll come down here and start working on the mast while this is curing properly, and then hopefully when I remove all of this stuff, things are going to look good. But yeah, we will know tomorrow. Now, home for dinner. Oh, God, my back. Ah! The last few days I've been feeling a bit under the weather. It seems there's a bug going in the family, and of course it managed to jump to me as well. But I'm back down here now, and this of course means that the epoxy that I used to laminate the Formica onto the new countertops has had plenty of time to cure. The result of this little experiment, and I think I can rightly call it that, is actually pretty good. The Formica has adhered very well to the plywood, and there's no lumpiness or any major gaps around the edges. There are some places where the Formica kind of sits a little bit off the top of the plywood, but it's not too bad, and it's mostly around corners where I can stick some epoxy in there and just clamp down on it. So overall, I'm really happy with this. I think it's going to turn out great. But now I need to trim the edges around the boards and trim away all the Formica. And I'm not sure how to approach that, because as a test, I did that on this board, which is going to be the new locker lid for the little locker behind the oven. And it came out well, but it really was a painstaking process, and it required a lot of attention to detail and a lot of time. So yeah, I'm going to have to go very slowly and very carefully when I do this, and also probably read up on having the right tools and methods for this job. But I'm going to leave that for a while because I need to turn my attention to the mast. It's now been sitting outside for a better part of a week waiting to get stepped, and yeah, there are a couple of things I need to do before we can do that. Last year I replaced all of the sheaves here at the masthead, and I said that once the mast was stepped I was going to get to replacing the rest of the sheaves in the sheave boxes further down the mast. Of course, as things turn out, that never happened. There wasn't enough time last year. So I think in the spirit of this year's kind of theme of getting back to some unfinished business, I'm going to replace the rest of the sheaves now. A little earlier I was down here and I drilled out the rivets that hold this sheave box here in place. Now this one was unused, so I thought it was a good test in case it didn't work and I couldn't put it back on the mast. I could just live without it for a while. But the sheave box actually came out very easily, and replacing the sheave wasn't very difficult either. So now just putting it back here and putting 2 new rivets in there shouldn't be a big issue either. Well, I appear to have hit a snag. The test sheave box, I took it up to the chandlery and I punched the pin out with a punch and a really big sledgehammer, and that worked great. But down here I only have my regular hammer and it's really not providing enough force to push these pins out. So I'm going to have to take these sheave boxes up to the chandlery and replace the sheaves up there. It does mean that it's going to take a little time, so I'm not going to be able to rivet them back today, which is a shame, but at least it'll get done by tomorrow. So yeah, for now, I'm just going to leave this as it is, and hopefully I can put everything back again tomorrow.
Well, I should know better. You know when someone says something like that, some little gremlin always turns up and bites them in the rear end. It's just one of those things you don't say out loud. At least the Formica countertops are coming along well, and it appears my woodworking fails aren't the end of the world, so things might just work out in the end. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help us out by leaving a like. It really does make a big difference, and press subscribe and click the notification bell to follow us on our journey. You can also follow us on social media, check out the links below for that, and thank you so much for watching. Fair winds.